There's a groundbreaking movie in sci-fi history that stunned the world upon its release. To this day, I vividly remember how the four dwarf monsters, parasitically attached to someone's stomach, cast a suffocating psychological shadow on my young heart. Today, let's revisit this mind-bending sci-fi film released in 1990. Douglas is a common Earth miner, simple-minded and physically strong, relying on manual labor to earn a living, but he's incredibly lucky. Not only does he have a 100-inch holographic TV at home, but he also has a beautiful wife who doesn't care about his financial status. However, Douglas has been having a recurring strange dream. In it, he appears on Mars with a woman he doesn't recognize, as if she is his wife. Waking from these dreams, Douglas feels an unreal sensation, leading him to contemplate settling on Mars. But his wife, uncharacteristically, strongly opposes his idea. Douglas temporarily gives up the plan, but the thought of going to Mars lingers in his mind. One day, while commuting to the construction site, he sees an advertisement for a new memory implant surgery. This procedure allows people to experience events that have never happened as if they were real. Intrigued, Douglas discusses it with his colleague Harry, who warns him of the dangers, recounting a friend who almost became a vegetable due to a lobotomy after undergoing the surgery. Harry advises Douglas against trying it lightly. After much thought, Douglas, disguised in different clothes, enters the memory implant company. He soon meets Bob, the sales manager, and expresses his desire to visit Mars. Bob enthusiastically extols the benefits of memory travel, alleviating Douglas's concerns. As Douglas is about to sign up, Bob suggests a more thrilling option, traveling to Mars as a tourist in a different identity. Intrigued by the various options on the screen, Douglas is immediately drawn to the identity of a secret intelligence agent. Enthralled by Bob's description of the perks this identity would bring, Douglas's eyes light up. Though it costs extra, Douglas doesn't hesitate and signs the contract. Douglas was quickly taken to the memory implant surgery room. The doctors administered an anesthetic and set up the appearance and figure of the female protagonist as per Douglas's thoughts. As the anesthetic took effect, Douglas's consciousness blurred, and the memory began to be implanted in his brain. However, halfway through the procedure, the front desk informed Bob of a malfunction. They then witnessed Douglas going berserk. Unable to subdue Douglas, Bob was choked by him. In a critical situation, the doctor brought a tranquilizer gun and nearly emptied a whole bottle of medicine to finally put Douglas to sleep. Bob, having narrowly escaped death, angrily questioned the doctor about the botched procedure, but the doctor said they hadn't even started to implant Douglas' memory. Bob realized that Douglas might have had a memory implanted secretly before coming to their company, and his current name and identity could be fake. Realizing they were dealing with forces beyond their control, they put Douglas in a taxi and sent him out of the company. Waking up confused, Douglas was taken to a nearby subway station by the clueless robot taxi driver. At the station, Douglas was confronted by Harry, who initially seemed friendly. Suddenly, Harry pulled out a gun, accusing Douglas of leaking secrets about Mars. Douglas, with memories of being a construction worker, had no idea about any secrets on Mars, but Harry just wanted to kill him. Instinctively, Douglas fought back, displaying advanced combat skills he never knew he had. He quickly overpowered and killed all the assailants. Stunned at what he had done, Douglas fled home in panic. He turned off all the lights and recounted the incident to his wife, Lori, who didn't believe him at first. But Lori didn't believe him. Only after seeing his blood-stained hands did Lori realize he was being pursued. Unexpectedly, while Douglas was cleaning the blood off in the bathroom, Lori suddenly pulled out a gun on him. After subduing Lori, Douglas discovered that his current memories were implanted, and Lori was not his wife but a Martian intelligence agent assigned to monitor him. Douglas then came to a startling realization. By now, his pursuers were already at his doorstep, but Lori was still trying to stall for time. However, Douglas wasn't falling for it anymore. Nevertheless, considering their past relationship as husband and wife, he only knocked Lori out with a punch. When the Intelligence Bureau's agents arrived, Douglas was already gone. It turned out that Lori was the girlfriend of Richter, the head of the Bureau's agents. Meanwhile, they had tracked down Douglas's location, and no matter how he tried to escape, the agents were always a step ahead in locating him. Douglas gradually realized something was amiss. After fending off a group of pursuers, he jumped into a moving subway and managed to evade capture again, but the Bureau quickly located him once more. Just as Douglas was preparing to rest for the night, he received a call from a mysterious person. His body had a tracker installed, and in 3 minutes, the Bureau's agents would break in. Following the mysterious person's instructions, Douglas wrapped a wet towel around his head to temporarily block the tracker's signal. The mysterious person then instructed him to go to the window. It turns out he's in a public phone booth downstairs, and he leaves a box at the intersection for Douglas to pick up. Only then did Douglas realize that this was all part of a plan he had arranged beforehand. But his box is almost taken over by an old lady passing by. As the Bureau's agents approached, Douglas commandeered a robot taxi and successfully escaped their encirclement. He then learned everything from the computer in the box. Douglas was once an intelligence officer who had previously committed numerous misdeeds under the directives of the Intelligence Bureau. A few weeks earlier, he met the love of his life and decided to turn over a new leaf. However, knowing too many secrets, he was brainwashed by the Bureau and sent back to Earth. The Douglas in the video outlined their previous plan. He needed to return to Mars to expose the Bureau's conspiracy. But first, he had to remove the tracker implanted in his head. After checking his equipment, Douglas took a deep breath and violently inserted the soul detector into his nostrils. As he stirred his brain, he finally dug out a big one. Staring at the tracker, larger than a fist, Douglas was puzzled about how someone managed to stuff it into his nostrils, but he didn't have time to think further. As agents from the Martian Intelligence Bureau had already tracked him down, he quickly destroyed his computer and stuffed the tracker into some food before tossing it aside. By the time the Martian Intelligence Bureau agents arrived, Douglas had already vanished without a trace. Richter could only kill the rat that had eaten the tracker in his rage. Meanwhile, Douglas had already taken a spacecraft to the Martian Federation, located 400 million kilometers from Earth. But by this time, Douglas had transformed into a woman through a disguise. Unfortunately, agents from the Martian Intelligence Bureau had also tracked him to the airport. Luckily, Douglas successfully deceived both the Martian Intelligence Bureau and airport security with his disguise. Everything was going smoothly until Douglas' mask suddenly malfunctioned, and he uncontrollably started tearing at his mouth. This scene was witnessed by an agent of the Martian Intelligence Bureau, and realizing he was completely surrounded, Douglas stopped his disguise. He pressed something in his ear, and in the next second, his facial mask began to separate, revealing his true face underneath. Taking advantage of the chaos caused by the explosion, Douglas successfully escaped the Martian Intelligence Bureau's capture. He then went to a pre-booked hotel on Mars and presented his identification. It turned out that before his memory was erased, Douglas had left some items in the hotel. However, in the large metal storage box, there was only a palm-sized note instructing him to go to a place called Mars Paradise to find a woman named Melina. Shortly after leaving the hotel, Douglas was pulled into a taxi by a man. Benny calmly told Douglas not to panic, as gun battles were a daily occurrence on Mars. It turns out that ever since the Martian Intelligence Bureau took control of the entire planet, their exploitation of the lower classes had become increasingly severe, to the point of even selling air to Martian residents. Some poor people, unable to afford air, had mutated and joined the resistance in an attempt to overthrow the cruel rule of the Martian Intelligence Bureau. Benny quickly brought Douglas to Mars Paradise, where he met the woman named Melina. This was supposed to be their first meeting, but Melina seemed very familiar with him. However, Douglas had no recollection of Melina. Worried that Douglas was still working for the Martian Intelligence Bureau, Melina pointed a gun at him and drove him out. Back at the hotel, Douglas can't quite figure out what went wrong. Just when he was unsure of what to do next, Edgemar from the memory implant company suddenly approached him. Edgemar claimed that Douglas was still lying on the company's machine due to a doctor's error and was trapped in his memories, unable to escape. If Douglas couldn't break free from this memory soon, he would be killed by the fictitious characters in his memory as the plot continued to develop, dying in the false fantasy he created. Edgemar's purpose was to extract Douglas from this memory. As soon as Edgemar finished speaking, Lori walked in from outside, now appearing as Douglas' wife on Earth. Seeing that Douglas was already a bit shaken, Edgemar took out a red capsule from his pocket. As long as Douglas ate it now, he would be able to go back to the real world at once. Under Edgemar's continuous persuasion, Douglas put the pill in his mouth. Just as Douglas was considering whether to swallow it, he suddenly saw a drop of sweat on Edgemar's forehead. Douglas immediately reacted and shot Edgemar without hesitation. Lori also dropped her disguise. Suddenly, a large group of agents rushed into the room, and Douglas was quickly overwhelmed and subdued. Just as they were about to take Douglas away, Melina arrived in time, catching the Martian Intelligence Bureau agents off guard and killing them. Lori, hiding to the side, suddenly kicked Melina's submachine gun away, and they immediately grappled with each other. However, Melina was no match Lori. As she was about to be killed by Lori, Douglas suddenly grabbed his submachine gun and killed Lori without hesitation. Then They hurried back to Mars Paradise. The mutants guarding the place immediately opened the hidden escape tunnel, where George, the leader of the resistance, had been waiting for a long time. At that moment, Benny also rushed in, and the atmosphere in the tunnel became tense. It turned out that Benny was also a member of the resistance. He twisted off his right hand from his arm, revealing an arm with only 4 fingers. Benny, who had been exposed to Martian radiation for years, had evolved into a mutant. Consequently, George took them to the secret base of the resistance. However, they soon learned some troubling news. The Martian intelligence agency had shut down the air supply system in their area and threatened to hand over Douglas within 12 hours. If not complied with, everyone in the area would suffocate within a day. The decision about Douglas' fate rested solely with the leader of the resistance. George then took him into an office. As Douglas wondered where the leader was, a baby's hand suddenly emerged from George's convulsing body. At this moment, Douglas realized that Quado had been parasitizing inside George's stomach all along, which explained why the Martian intelligence agency had been unable to find him. Long-term oxygen deprivation and space radiation had caused varying degrees of mutation in Martians, but it also endowed them with extraordinary telepathic abilities. Douglas hoped Quado could help restore his erased memories. Quado began sharing his memories with Douglas. It turned out that 500,000 years ago, aliens built a massive planetary ecosystem transformer on Mars. Once activated, it could reshape the atmospheric environment, making Mars habitable for carbon-based life. However, the Martian Intelligence Agency, prioritizing mining over terraforming, shut down the machine to protect the planet's precious mineral resources. Douglas aimed to restart this machine to free the Earth miners and make Mars habitable. Just then, the cave started shaking violently as soldiers broke into the rebel headquarters with mining vehicles. Douglas rushed to wake George, but it was too late for them to escape. As more and more soldiers came in after the trucks crashed through the walls, Douglas had to cover the retreat while firing back. Unexpectedly, as they were about to don spacesuits to escape, Benny suddenly shot and killed George. Oppressed for too long, Benny had become a dog of the Martian Intelligence Agency for a high reward. They were then taken back to the Martian Intelligence Agency. There, Cohagen greeted Douglas warmly. It turned out Douglas was a double agent. Only by erasing his memory and making him a completely different person could they gain the trust of the rebel leader. This was all part of their pre-planned strategy. Next, Douglas would be implanted with memories of being an agent, becoming Cohagen's most trusted operative again. They forcibly strapped Douglas and Melina to the equipment. When they woke up again, they would become entirely different people. However, Cohagen never anticipated that Douglas, having lost his memory, was no longer his subordinate. The current Douglas only wanted to be himself. As the machine started up, Douglas broke free from the metal chair and quickly eliminated the doctor. The others were no match for him, and they managed to escape the Martian Intelligence Agency just before a large number of soldiers arrived. By this time, the residents outside had already lost their ability to move due to lack of oxygen. In this critical situation, their only option was to hurry to the depths of the mine and restart the alien atmospheric transformer. Once activated, the reactor would melt Mars' subterranean ice, releasing oxygen and transforming Mars into a second habitable planet for humans. However, when they arrived, the Martian Intelligence Agency had already stationed heavy guards at the entrance to the device. As Douglas entered, he was fired upon by the soldiers guarding the place, but before they could rejoice, Douglas on the ground started laughing. The soldiers thought their guns were malfunctioning, but it turned out Douglas hadn't been shot at all. He had used a holographic projection to deceive everyone. When they realized this, Douglas suddenly attacked from behind, swiftly eliminating a large number of soldiers. After that, Douglas relied on the holographic projection and started to kill so much that they couldn't tell if Douglas was real or not. Douglas then handed the holographic projector to Melina, and the remaining 2 soldiers were quickly dealt with. Douglas hurried to the atmospheric transformer's control panel. Just as he was about to activate it, Cohagen, who had been waiting there, intended to completely destroy the alien machine to maintain his control over Mars. In a critical moment, Melina arrived in time and took down Cohagen, but before he was completely dead, Cohagen activated the switch. Douglas quickly threw a bomb into a nearby exhaust pipe, which also damaged the machine's internal sealing system. The strong negative pressure pulled everyone around. Just as they could barely hold on, Douglas used his last bit of strength to push his hand down and activate the reactor. They were sucked outside by the negative pressure on Mars. Just as they were about to suffocate, the alien machine started working, and an endless supply of oxygen burst forth from the ground. A massive airflow instantly filled Mars' atmosphere, accompanied by the first rays of light in the sky. All the Martians were finally saved. This is Total Recall, a sci-fi film released in 1990. In those days, it was a mind-bending film, so if you're interested, you can watch the original. That's all for today. We'll see you next time.